Fine face. Good face. Fine face. Good face. Fine face.
And it gets your face like warmed up.
Super serious.
Where nothing fun or funny ever happens.
This is a super serious thing.
I don't even like dogs.
Super serious.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Super Serious Dog Podcast. Hosted by myself, Misha Bielitsky, and my co-host, Courtney Cuellar.
Me.
As you may know by now, this is the type of podcast where sometimes we talk about super serious things, and but usually it's not so serious. It's kind of a sarcastic title. Today's topic, however, is about hiking, especially now during COVID. I know hiking is one of the few things that we are allowed to do, but it's also really, really, really good for your dog's health and mental well-being as well as your own. So we're here to talk to you about that today. Courtney has a lot of experience hiking. She actually, a very big part of her business includes hiking. So she's the expert.
Well, I mean, expert's probably a stretch, but I do a lot of hiking. I've been hiking on trails for at least the last 5 years on public trails. So sharing and having proper etiquette on them. And so that's a big thing I want to talk about and focus on is appropriate etiquette on the trail.
Yeah, for sure. Well, before we dive into the etiquette stuff, maybe for those folks who don't yet hike or would like to get into it, they're just not sure, what are some of the benefits that you've seen in dogs? And what benefits have you noticed even in yourself as well from hiking?
Well, it's a really good way to connect with nature, especially for a dog, since they are a very nature driven creature. There's lots of smells, a lot of, distractions out there that you can work through. But really it allows the dog time to be a dog, to follow the trail of a squirrel or a previous dog or a previous person that went by. It gives them a lot of mental stimulation. It also, for the human, gives you some peace. It's very pretty to be outside and just kind of take some deep breaths because you're climbing up a hill and you have to breathe deep.
Or else you might pass out.
Right. And also, you hear the birds singing, the wind's blowing in the trees. There's pretty flowers out right now because it's springtime. So, there's so many benefits.
Yeah.
And it's exercise, get that blood moving, get off the couch.
Yeah. Get your steps in, but in a nice setting, not in a smog-filled area.
Right.
One thing that Lee and I used to do, my fiance, when we lived in apartment complexes, sometimes if we couldn't get to nature, fortunately we live in Austin, Texas, so there's tons of nature everywhere, but sometimes that nature's very flooded. So we'd go on urban hikes. So there are these government buildings that were right by our house, and they have big fields that you could run around in. But even if the dog stayed on leash, it was still a fun, quote, urban hike because there was just lots of squirrels and smells and people, and other people walk their dogs, and there's stuff to climb on, and just like regular hiking, but in an urban setting. So it was pretty cool. I think also one of the things that I really enjoyed whenever I started hiking. So just for a little bit of history, Courtney and I have known each other for 5 years now. 5 years, I'd say. And so a few years ago, she started actually incorporating hiking into her business, like I said. And so whenever I broke out to start my own dog training business as well, I was like, well, I don't have a lot of stuff to do. I'm going to join Courtney on her hikes and see what this is all about. And then eventually I started doing it on my own as well and taking client dogs and all that stuff. And one of the first times that I hiked without you, Courtney, I distinctly remember getting kind of lost at Walnut Creek because there's a lot of windy trails. And I was looking for a specific spot, but this moment of panic took over me where I was like, I don't know how am I going to get out of here? Have I walked in circles over and over again? I'm tired. Are the dogs tired? Have they had water? Where's the water? Maybe they need to drink some. And this whole panic attack almost happened. But then I just took a deep breath and I was like, okay, just keep walking. Cause worst case scenario, the trail's going to spit you out somewhere.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
but having that moment of like fear and terror and working through it and then, coming out of, and making it back home safely, obviously, because I'm here today. Like it was fine. Everything was fine. And it was a really, really good moment for me, a growth moment.
A growment?
A growment, as I usually say. I was going to say it cheesy. But yes, it was a growment for me.
Yeah,
So,
I used to actually seek those out. I would go out there and I'd get to a fork and I'd be like, left. And I get to the next fork and I'd be like, right. And I just pick random ones and in hopes that I would get that lost feeling. I did it so often though. I like I told you when you started hiking with me, I can't get lost out here anymore. Unfortunately, I know where all the trails are now because I've just wandered on all of them. We actually did find some new ones though. That was pretty fun.
Yeah. Especially because like I was leading the way, because subconsciously you're going to end up going the same paths you've gone before, even if you don't necessarily recognize them. So, so let's talk a little bit about how to hike well, right? How to do it well, how to have good etiquette, because there's no rules. I mean, other than like, this is where you're allowed to be on leash and this is where you're allowed to be off leash. There's no rules posted.
Yep. That's all the sign said. It says is off leash here. So
yeah,
I understand why people would just think, okay, well, I have a dog and it usually has a leash on, but here's the place for it to not have a leash on. But it shouldn't be that simple. There should be some training and some practice that goes into that. And then we can all enjoy it. We can all enjoy the off leash fun time. One thing you need to establish with your dog though is called pack drive. And that's where the dog learns that staying with you is more beneficial. So even if you don't technically know where you're going, the dog's still going to stay with you because you're the leader. You're the one that knows what's going on. But that means that your first couple hikes probably need to be on a leash. There's a few exceptions to that rule, but you can start off on a leash in off leash areas, and there's going to be a few things you can gauge to figure out when your dog's going to be able to be that cool off-leash hiking dog that just sticks with you.
How long of a leash do you start with, Courtney? And do you graduate to longer leashes, or do you just go from a short leash to a off leash? How does that work?
I mean, it's not an exact science because there's always exceptions and you're working with a living creature.
Sure.
So there's some give and take, but I usually start off on a shorter leash and I want the dog to tune in.
Like 4 foot, 5 foot, something like
4
that?
4 or 5 feet, 4 to 6 foot.
Like a standard leash. Okay.
Yeah. And, depending on where the dog's at in its previous training and how well it walks on a leash is dependent on what I'm going to hold it accountable for walking with me. I generally just want it to walk in my bubble. I don't need a perfect heel. I don't need anything super fancy. I usually have a group of dogs with me, so I just need you to stay in the group with me, move with me. Once I have the dog tuned in with me, I'll invite it to sniff some things. I'll allow it to put some slight pressure on the leash. It's not allowed to dig in and pull me, but I want it to sniff. I want it to explore. And then I want it to check back in. So in the midst of sniffing and exploring, I'm going to say the dog's name. I'm going to pat my legs. I'm going to do something that says, hey, do you remember that I'm here? And that's going to tell me how soon that dog gets to have more freedom.
So you don't just wait till you need your dog to listen to you?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. If you wait until your dog sees another dog or sees a squirrel or sees a person or sees a kid or sees anything super interesting to see if your dog's going to listen, I'd almost put money on the fact your dog's not going to listen.
Yeah. And I laugh about that because like there's so many things in life where I just kind of jump in feet first and I don't really think about it. I just I get in the middle of it and I figure it out as I go. And I laugh because like so many times, like I have a lot of clients who are parents, for instance, and they would never do that with their kids. They would never just be like, okay, you're at Disneyland, let's meet here back at 5, even though you're only, 8 years old or something like that. They would never do that to their kids.
Right.
But like, you don't think about it because you just kind of have these underlying assumptions, whether you realize it or not, about your dogs. So, and, it's a really good point to practice and be prepared. And I think the other aspect too is be really aware of your surroundings, especially right now in light of the fact that we don't have tons of information on this virus. More information is coming out every day. I think it's even more important to now be hyper aware of, oh, I hear dog tags jingling that way, right? Okay, they seem like they're moving away from us, or they seem like they're moving closer. Or you hear somebody going, buddy, or whatever their dog's name is, like, like loose dog, maybe I should be a little bit more aware of,
Right.
where my dog's.
Where's my dog at? What's my dog paying attention to? That's one thing you super need to focus on, because if you can hear dog tags, your dog could hear them 5 minutes ago. So if they're close enough for you to hear, they've been close enough for your dog to hear. So you need to look at your dog. You need to make sure you can see your dog and see, are they fixating on that or do they not care? Right. And, is that sound moving away from us or towards us? And then are we going to go left or right here? And judging, what's going on in your environment and making the best decision for you and your dog.
Yeah. And it's a skill too, right? At first, it is going to be something that you're going to have to think and focus a lot. And you may want to just plan to do a little bit of a shorter hike with those things in mind. Like if you were normally, let's say you would go for an hour, just do it for half an hour, because honestly, it will be mentally exhausting, especially if you have multiple dogs. And especially if you're doing this with client dogs, even if just the one client dog, like if you're a trainer as well, or maybe you're a dog sitter or dog walker and, you're offering something extra. Right. That kind of thing. So, and it's a skill for yourself and it's a skill for your dogs too. And that actually, you kind of started to touch on something. What visual, how much do you like to see your dogs when you go hiking? So how far ahead of you is okay?
I like to see them the whole time.
Yeah.
So that answer varies depending on where we're at. And what the trail ahead of us looks like. If it's a really tight, windy trail and I can only see 4 feet ahead of us, I'm probably actually going to call the dogs all the way to me and stay with me, because, there could be a bike coming around that corner. There could be a person, a dog, a, person with 6 kids. I've seen it happen. Like you don't know what's coming around that corner, and we're on a tight trail. So I keep the dogs closer to me. But if we're in a wide open space where I can see for like almost a mile, then I'm going to allow the dogs to get a little farther, knowing that my dogs will come back to me when I call them. And that's because they've graduated to that level of trust.
Yeah. So we started to talk a little bit about, from a short leash, and then I asked you how long of a leash. So kind of what are some good milestones that people can sort of look for? Because the tough thing with dogs and dog training, and especially recall and that sort of stuff, is that people want to know a timeline. Well, how many weeks is it going to take, for instance? And there's no exact science. So what we look for is milestones. So what are some good ones that you look for when you start upgrading and graduating dogs?
Right. So, I start with walking with me on a shorter leash, being attuned with me, and then inviting them to have some freedom. And if they can check in with me just from smelling something, with a very mild, like, hey, I'm talking to you, then I'm going to allow them a little more and a little more. I'll probably switch to a 15-foot leash if I feel that the dog is checking in with me regularly, very aware of my presence. Then when we graduate to that 15-foot leash, I either tie it to me or I hold on to it. And what I'm looking for there is to give the dog more freedom, to get farther away from me, to interact with other dogs, to kind of follow that that squirrel trail a little farther that they smell, maybe wander off the trail a little bit if that's what they're into. But it's a trust-giving exercise for the human, because you have to let the dog do what they're going to do to some extent. And you're really watching for how often are they checking in with me? How aware are they of where I'm going? Can I change directions without saying anything and they know before they hit the end of the leash? Or are they constantly hitting the end of that leash before they're like, oh, you're going this way now? Because if they're constantly hitting the end of the leash, they're not ready for you to drop that leash.
And mind you, we're not talking about like sneak attacks either, where the dog's running really fast one direction, you go, boom, I'm going to take advantage. No, it's like we're kind of walking at a casual, slow, normal, meandering sort of pace.
They're slack in
And-
the long line, and
Yeah.
so you just kind of turn around and see if the dog realizes it.
So this is also not even just you asking them to pay attention, because you are doing that, but you're also just seeing how much do they naturally check in.
Cool. And I do interact, and I do call their name, and I do ask them to check in, but I don't give more freedom until I see how much they're naturally checking in. Because in the heat of the moment, when they're chasing a squirrel or they see another dog, dog trainers often say casually, like, their ears turn off, but they're not listening for your call. They are on another mindset. They have their own plan. They're in a very primal, sniffing, smelling, running, peeing on stuff mood, and so they're probably not going to listen to you verbally in that moment. So what you want to have again is that pack drive, to where they don't necessarily want to leave you, because they feel a desire to be with you, because you're a part of their pack, and you are safety, and you are the one that will help them get back home where the resources are.
Yeah. So this may be difficult to quantify, but how many instances of like those kind of more hectic moments do you like to see them responding well before you also take them off leash or graduate them to an even longer leash?
Super difficult to quantify, because it very much depends on the dog, and what they are predispositioned to do.
Right.
So if the owner of the dog, because I'm typically hiking client dogs, if the owner of the dog tells me, he's attacked 3 small dogs out on walks, or when he ran out the front door or whatever. So even though that dog so far, every time I've taken it hiking, has been fine with my small dog, has never shown me that it's going to attack another dog. I'm still not going to give that dog trust until I've seen it around another small dog running away from us, right? Because I want to. That dog has a predisposition to have an issue with small dogs. So because I know that, that's going to be a kind of a factor that I hold on to with that dog.
Yeah.
Happy-go-lucky golden retriever that has never hurt a fly is not as predispositioned to have an issue
As other breeds or something.
Other breeds.
No, that makes sense. Courtney, I think this is going to have to be a 2-parter, because I feel like I have so much more I want to ask you about and talk to you about. So let's save kind of our other stuff that we wanted to talk about for part 2. But I did want to go over in our last few minutes before we wrap up just some good general safety tips in light of COVID. So like one of the things I like to do is I'll bring a mask with me, even though, yes, you're out in nature and yes, you're exercising. There's a lot of relaxed restrictions for that. Sometimes the trails are really, really narrow, and there's literally only one way to pass. And that's like chest to chest, or, butt to butt, or something like that.
Or you have to like jump off into the side into some pokey
bushes
stuff.
But you're still close to them, right? So I still like to bring a mask just in case. And that's where that kind of self-awareness comes into play. Is there anything else that you like to do, Courtney?
Hand sanitizer, just in case you do have to interact with someone else and their dog. Like, if someone's dog is not listening to them and running away from them, and it's running towards you, if that person is screaming, "Oh my God, can you help me? My dog, I can't catch it." And you can see that this person is like obviously frazzled. Be a good human and crouch down and grab the dog and hand it off to them, and then use your hand sanitizer. If that person is calling their dog and doesn't seem frazzled, ignore the dog. Because, it's a training opportunity for that person. That would be my one thing is,
and then you're not,
right.
And then you're not unnecessarily touching somebody else's dog, right? Like there's not tons of evidence that suggests it's transferred through fur, but there's also just not tons of evidence, right? There's a lot we don't know, and a lot of information that we're getting from a lot of different sources, sometimes conflicting. So I think that's a good piece of advice in general, but also in light of everything that's happening.
Make the choices that are best for you.
Yes. And if you see somebody who is wearing, masks and gloves and all that, even though you don't think that's necessary, I think another good piece of advice is give them extra space. There are so many times where like people will just pass really close to one another, even though it's a really wide section of trail. And clearly if people are wearing all that gear, and especially that we're in Texas and it's hot, that means it matters to them. And you should be considerate and respectful and just try to be a good human.
Right. Don't pet their dog.
And don't pet their dog unless you ask, right? I mean, I know it's hard. It's a hard habit to break in terms of like you see a cute fluffy dog and you want to say hi and you want to pet it. And sometimes it's subconscious. Sometimes you don't even think about it, right? But try really, really hard to break that habit, right? Us dog trainers are in the business of breaking bad habits and creating new positive habits. So we're here to tell you it is possible to break a habit like that. Even if you don't want to, it's for the greater good, right? I also think bringing a leash with you, even if your dogs are really good off leash, just bring a leash just in case, right? What if there is a situation? I think that's just good hiking advice in general. But again, there is a situation where maybe somebody is like, please don't touch my dogs and please don't let your dog play with my dog, right? Having that leash there, especially if your dog's kind of like, maybe they really, really, really like playing with other dogs.
Right.
I think that would just be helpful for them. And
just throw a leash on your dog. It's not the end of the world. They can be on leash for 5 minutes while you pass these people or whatever.
Yeah. It's also a fun way to throw off your dogs too, right? Anything you can do to change routine and habit and just be like, I'm not usually on leash here. What are we doing? This is new. Can be fun and exciting for them. So Awesome. Well, that was a really great chat. I love talking about hiking and it makes me want to go hiking really bad. Right now, even though it's 1,000 degrees outside already.
It's so hot.
It's so hot. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you like what you heard, please like, rate, share, subscribe, all that kind of fun stuff. Ooh, my alarm's going off. And if you have questions you want us to answer, maybe you have some more specifics since we're going to talk about hiking again soon, send us an email. You can email us at superseriousdogpodcast@gmail.com. And if you really want to support us and you really love us and you really want to show us you care, you can sign up on Patreon. And that's Super Serious Dog Podcast or Patreon/Super Serious Dog Podcast.
Yeah.
There we go. I got it.
Nice.
Well, thank you guys for tuning in.